This is the other one. That's very complicated.
Now what?
We are live, Aldo. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Now you can talk?
Go.
So, do you hear me from the online connection?
Yeah.
If I move, do you still hear me?
We can hear you, but right now we cannot see you.
There is a camera somewhere.
Yeah.
Okay, so I will stay here. So thanks for having me here today. I was asked to give you an overview of where do we come from, what are we doing now, what is the future of AI, kind of a panorama of the field. And of course, in an hour, this is very difficult. So I'll try to do my best to encourage you to look forward and to work on this field, apply the field to your studies. But let's see if I succeed. So the first thing to say is that I would like to give you a few messages. The first one is that AI is really a fantastic thing. It's something great. It has, by the way, I will be speaking in English and the slides are in Catalan in case there are some challenges for languages. So also that the history of AI is really a fascinating one. I mean, it's a quest of human beings to have machines that can do our intellectual work, not just the physical work, but the intellectual work. Now, where are we and why am I here today? Probably it's because the generative AI has been like a wave that has been going over us because it is doing things that seem to be incredible. They are very good, very interesting, but there is a lot of misunderstanding of what generative AI is, actually. And of course, AI in general, not just generative AI, is already being very useful in areas like space science. It has been applied a lot in your field. You know that already. So where are we going to? One of the things, and I think Europe is leading towards that part of AI, is to responsible AI. AI that has some ethical principles embedded in the system. So this is the future. So we will talk about the past, we will talk about the current situation, and we will talk a bit about the future. First of all, what is AI? I mean, everybody here will have an idea, of course, but the classical definitions we've got, we've been using for many, many years, can be read like that. Basically, it is to make machines think. The idea is to make machines solve problems for which we humans need our brains in order to solve them, okay? That's a very generic definition, not a very precise definition, similar to the definitions of health or the definition for the health sciences or the definition of life in biology. They are very undefined concepts. The European Union that has regulated AI now defines artificial intelligence as any computational system that has one of three cognitive capacities: reasoning, learning, or modeling the environment, including the humans that are in that environment. Okay? Any system that has one of these three capacities would be considered an AI system. It's a bit more precise than the definitions that we classically use. How does it work? I mean, there are a number of things that you already know, I'm sure. First one is data. I mean, this is like the fuel of artificial intelligence. I will put some buts later, but nowadays. For instance, to recognize faces of cats, you need hundreds or thousands of pictures of cats. And algorithms, which are basically the recipes or the combination of instructions in a computer that will manipulate the data into solutions. And the most common technique or the most common type of algorithms these days are those that are called machine learning. Machine learning algorithms, basically, they try to learn patterns from data. And instead of giving rules to computers so that computers take decisions based on those rules, computers with machine learning capabilities learn the rules that then they will apply in order to solve a problem. In a sense, it's like, as you know, in the generative AI, I mean, you learn the model and then you reason using the model in order to take decisions. So this is what machine learning is doing, learning the rules and then later on applying the rules. If you take an analogy from learning basketball, the data could be the matches that you can watch or the videos of sending, I don't know how is that in English actually, sending the ball to the basket. The algorithm will be the practice, is try to do to get the result many times. And the learning would be how your brain and your body adapt in order to be successful in that job, taking into account the strength, the angle, and the distance that you need in order to put the ball in the basket. So we do that as humans all the time in all our tasks. The question of AI is how to make a computer do a similar thing. There are two types of AI. The first one is what is called the narrow AI. And the narrow AI is specialized in a particular task. It doesn't solve everything, it solves one thing. It's the artificial intelligence we have today, still today. For instance, translating between two languages, or making recommendations for music, or doing medical diagnosis. If I have a system that is good at medical diagnosis, I cannot ask the system to translate between two languages. It doesn't know anything about that. Every system is specialized. The strong AI, also called general AI, is a system or a type of AI that is capable of solving any problem that you can imagine, similar to the human intelligence. Human intelligence can be adapted to any problem. Even a new problem, we are capable of dealing with it and trying to solve it. This general AI, we don't have it yet, okay? This is something, some people have the confusion that the generative AI is some sort of strong AI or general AI. Is not the case. We can discuss about it. You find it everywhere. When you use Google Maps, you find AI because it combines the traffic situation, your preferences. It can predict what will happen with the traffic. So it uses very complex models behind it in order to make your recommendation of what should you do in terms of going from point A to point B. For instance, when you have grammar checkers in which it is checking whether a word is correctly written or not, it takes into account in modern times a large language models that determine, given the context, that is what is around the word that the system is checking, what is the right way of writing that particular word in whatever language. Okay, so grammar checkers are using LLMs these days. And if you have things like Instagram or TikTok in which you have videos and you want to modify the video, adding elements or changing the structure of the face using computer vision techniques, there is AI being used there. So nowadays, almost any company that is building products, digital products that are being consumed by all of us are using AI techniques in one way or another. Okay, so that's for what is AI very soon, very quickly in 2 slides. Now, where do we come from? And I always put a slide that people may be surprised. Ramon Llull. Everybody in this room, probably not everybody, but some people know about Ramon Llull. So he is somehow the father of the Catalan literature, and the Catalan language was somehow picked by this guy. But he, apart from his novels, he had this vision of a system he called Ars Magna. And that was a machine. This machine, I could have brought one. Okay, these are circles with letters that there was a little rope in his books from the 13th century. I mean, and then you would turn the wheels to put the letters in a particular pattern. And then using some tables, it would be able to construct proofs of certain claims. The greatness is good, I don't know. And then he would, by turning the wheels and checking the tables, he would build a demonstration, a proof, a logical proof that that statement is true. So it was a reasoning machine. So his aim was automating how to reason. All this work is fascinating. I mean, he wrote a couple of hundreds of books where he applied the method to many different areas. And I suggest you have a look at that. I put this as an example of an early AI. Why? Because remember, European Union AI, what is an AI? Is any machine for reasoning, learning, or modeling. That was a machine for reason in the 13th century. This inspired Leibniz, that you know very well, the father of modern science. In his PhD, he cited Ramon Llull extensively, 300 years after. George Boole, who made the mathematical modeling and the computation of logic. And this guy, that you will forget his name as soon as you leave this room, is Everett Willem Beth. This guy invented in the mid-20th century a method called tableau analytics. That method is a demonstration method, an automatic demonstration method that is almost the same as Ramon Llull proposed 700 years before. The thing is that some of his books were lost for centuries. Some books were only found, I would say, like 40 years ago. And part of his work was totally ignored because of that. Anyway, apart from this particular and local aspect, normally the guy that everybody sees as the father of AI is Alan Turing. Alan Turing was a mathematician and an engineer that you know, the one that discovered how to crack the Enigma code. That's what made him famous at the movies, so that everybody knows him because of that. But he wrote a book, a paper in 1950 about the following question: can machines think? So that was a question that computers at that moment were solving very complex things. People were thinking, oh my God, computers are really fantastic devices. And the question was, but can they do more than they are doing now? Can they really think? So he wrote a paper saying, well, I don't know what think means. He was a mathematician, an engineer. What thinks mean? And he said, well, I will define, it's what the mathematicians do. I mean, let's define what thinking is, and then we can answer the question. Otherwise, we will not be able to. And he defined what thinking meant for him through a test. And the test was, everybody knows the test here, not everybody. So the point was to put a human in front of a computer to do a chat with an entity that was behind the wall. This guy doesn't know what is behind these doors, whether there is a human, whether there is a computer there. The question is, in 5 minutes, through the chat, this person will answer whether what is behind the wall is a human or a computer. If the person says, no, there is a human on the other side of the wall, but what in fact is there is a computer, then Turing said, I will say then that the computer thinks. The computer would pass the test. Okay, that was maybe some of you remember the old ones. I mean, the movie Blade Runner. There is a moment in which this guy is using a machine to try to identify whether the replicants are humans or not. And he's asking a number of questions, seeing their physical reactions. And so the question there is whether those machines pass the test of Turing or not, in a sense. I mean, this is a cinema's interpretation of the same point. Some people would say that there are already systems that passed the Turing test. And maybe for some uneducated people, some system may look like they are humans on the other side. Anyway, I would claim that it is hard to, I think with a bit of knowledge, it's very difficult that a human thinks that any of the systems nowadays would pass the Turing. Anyway, this is the start, I would say, of this idea of computers solving intellectual problems. At the same period, there was another issue, a very interesting, this is for deep discussions, I could say. Who knows about the Chinese room here? 3 people, fantastic. Okay, I was giving a chat to people in Segunda Bachillerat a week ago, and there was a classroom. Everybody knew about this because the philosophy teacher had explained the thing, and so there is hope. I think there is hope. Now, the problem is very simple. So you have a room, you have an individual inside, one of you inside the room, okay, and a number of big books, and 2 trays, the input and output. Now, outside, there is a Chinese person that has a question, writes the question in a piece of paper, and puts the question on the input tray. Inside, the guy takes the paper, opens the books and looks for the pattern of symbols that are written in Chinese. That guy is very good at recognizing symbols. And very fast, it finds in the possibly infinite book where that particular question is. Goes there, sees the answer, and copies the answer in another piece of paper. And then puts the piece of paper on the output tray. Okay? The guy outside reads the answer, very happy. It's the number of the raffle, and okay, I lost, fantastic. Goes away. Now the question is, does the guy inside the room know Chinese? Probably not. No, I mean, in principle, not. I mean, the guy doesn't know about Chinese, knows about looking for symbols in a book. But the question is, what about the system? The guy, the books, and the room with the trays, does the system know Chinese? The debate about that has been decades long. I mean, people arguing in favor or against. Many people say, aren't we humans actually machines that are learning the books? So what are we doing in our life is basically learning the books to answer the questions that they will put us in the future, and that's it. So we are also symbol manipulators. There is nothing else than symbol manipulation in any intellectual activity that we do. Or instead, there is something else. But if there is something else, what is that? Now, this debate has been ongoing. We will refer to it a bit, but you can start thinking what is your position on that. Around the same time, there was a meeting in Dartmouth in the United States where people got very excited. I mean, between 1950, the end of the war, 1950, the idea of using computers for intellectual activities, everybody was excited. And they were starting to make things, build things to prove theorems, to translate languages. I don't know, you name it. Any idea? Playing checkers. I mean, everybody was kind of writing programs. The guys met in 56 for 3 months. This was a real meeting. 3 months, okay? Eating lunch, dinner together, discussing. And at that meeting is when they, for the first time, use the term artificial intelligence. They were discussing between machine intelligence and artificial intelligence. There were arguments pro and cons. In the end, it was artificial intelligence. This is the surviving guys in 2006 that met in order to open this memento of the meeting. Okay, so 1950, 1956, these are the start of the field. And as I said, there were many programs being developed at that time. One that is very interesting, given the current developments, was ELIZA. ELIZA was a system made by that guy, Weizmann. This is a computer of the time. So this was like a chatbot. So you would say something, I have problems with my brother, then the system will answer. The answers would seem like there is a human on the other side. Remember, the Turing test was very recent at that moment. Everybody was trying to have systems that look like passing the Turing test. Don't be so brief. Can you explain it a bit more? I would like to kick my brother. What would it mean on your life to manage to kick your brother, and so on? It goes on. If you look into the code of ELIZA, it is basically pattern, grammatically correct patterns that are using words from here and there in the conversation to pretend to understand what the other person is doing. But very quickly, after a few interactions, you realize that ELIZA doesn't know anything, doesn't understand anything. But that was an initial example of a chatbot of what currently we have. So it's not that original in a sense as an idea. It's quite old. The history very quickly. I would spend too much time on that. So there have been two approaches in AI. One is the symbolic approach. Remember the Chinese room, the idea that we are symbol manipulators, and that actually a computer is nothing else than a symbol manipulator, that takes the input, manipulates the input, the ones and zeros, manipulates them and generates ones and zeros at the end. So it's moving symbols and manipulating symbols. Examples are the expert systems, the classical concept of expert system, where you basically, you design the solution. You say, how do you give the rules. You say how you're going to combine the symbols at the entrance in order to generate the symbols in the output. The other one is the connectionist approach, in which the solution is being built, the rules are being learned to some extent, and then there is some process of improvement of the result. The classical example are the neural networks that I will explain briefly, but most of you know very well. These two approaches have been fighting, go to the Chinese room, they have been fighting for the last 70 years in the field. For many years, this was the winning approach, the one that attracted most interest. Recently, it has been this one. Now, this one has limitations, both have limitations. The current view is trying to put them together. I mean, this is what is called the neurosymbolic approaches that are, I will explain that a bit in a moment. This is a typical example. This is from my PhD, this is my book. An expert system in 89, in which you had rules like this. If the patient had dermatologic manifestations and the manifestations are herpes, then it's highly possible that the pneumonia is bacterial. It was a system for the diagnosis of pneumonia. You may remember from those times in Blanes where this group actually started, and we were together on this endeavor, okay? For instance, in astrophysics, this is an ontology, it's another kind of symbolic system in which you write a lot, but basically you need to define everything, every concept and the relationship between concepts. Here, for instance, you would say that a galaxy is a class. This is OWL, is a kind of language for ontology definitions. You can say that an spiral galaxy is a kind of galaxy, an elliptical galaxy is a class of galaxy. All the knowledge has to be represented in an ontology. The system doesn't know anything. Every symbol and relations need to be established. And here this one says, in a very convoluted way, that there is a property of a spiral galaxy that is the fact that it has an arm, an spiral arm. Okay, that's what defines a galaxy, a spiral galaxy, as being a galaxy, is having that property. The subsymbolic approach is based on the metaphor of the neurons in the body, in our brains, in which we have three parts. I mean, you have the what are called the dendrites that are collecting information, an axon that goes to a body, and then an axon that basically aggregates whatever is received in the dendrites and generates an impulse to the next neuron. And then there are neurons that are connected one after another in the form of a graph, okay? So here you have the input, that could be like the tray of the Chinese room. Then this will move whatever input is here into the next layer by doing some multiplications and some aggregations on these links until the output, okay? So you have different layers. You have weights that are the parameters of the neural network. And basically, you may represent this as a big matrix. Because if you have all the nodes, you have a matrix, all the nodes to all the nodes, and then you have the weight, is the link between the two nodes, the number there. So that's why AI these days require these GPUs, because these are very good at multiplying matrices in a parallel way, okay? An example, a very simple example. I mean, you have, imagine the handwritten E, okay? You want to learn how to recognize that. Well, where the line is, you put a 1, and in the rest you put a 0. You have different ways of writing it. And then you make that as examples in order to learn a particular codification, another symbol. Actually, here, you may have some symbolic elements, but what you put at the input and output are symbols. That corresponds to the ASCII of the letter E. You do that, many handwritten symbols, and then the weights of here adjust to a particular mathematical process so that it can recognize new ways of writing E in the future. This is the subsymbolic approach. Now, Since 1910, 1912, there has been a revival of neural networks. They were very popular in the 80s. They were popular in the 90s. In the 90s, there were clashes between people were fighting. I mean, the symbolic and sub-symbolic approaches in conferences. I mean, it was a very interesting period. And now the thing is, because of the computational power, we have a very large number of layers in these neural nets. For instance, GPT 3.5 has 96 layers. In the old times, I mean, you would have one hidden layer in between. But now there are 96. And 175,000 million links between the nodes in these layers. 175 billion parameters, numbers. Now there are models that are using 1 trillion parameters, okay? So it's really a huge systems. Their big success, we will go through that. I mean, but for instance, recognition of voice. This is really now working pretty well. I was a couple of days ago, I was at the Libreria Ona. There was a meeting with the Esther Vera and the guys from the ARA journal. And I asked them the question whether they were using AI in their system, and all transcriptions are being done through AI. All the summaries of articles are done through AI. All the search for the keywords is done through AI. The translation is done through AI. So it's being used in many parts of the editorial process. And many of those things are based on deep learning methods, these kind of networks. Okay? This is also the bet that the large corporations are putting on AI these days. Most of the investment, I would say 98% of the investment goes into this kind of system. And the governments are believing that this is key for the future of the economy. I mean, 2 weeks ago, there was a directive by Donald Trump. I mean, he does directives every day, as you know. And the directive is about the application of AI to science, for instance, to astrophysics. And basically, the rhetoric used in the text, I recommend you to read it. It's very, very interesting. It's about winning, it's about dominance, about the state being the leader, remembering the Manhattan Project. So it's this kind of rhetoric that is used by the governments now in order to push the research agenda towards the use of this kind of model. So we have in Europe, I will comment that a bit later, a bit more about this. Now, the history is very simplified, but for you to have is the symbolic and the sub-symbolic approaches fighting for a number of years with successes and failures. And now, there was a moment in which AI accelerated. The first one for the old people here, there are quite a few, is Kasparov. You may remember in 1997 that there was a system called eBlue by IBM that won Kasparov, who was the best player in the world, and that was people were astonished. I mean, how can a machine win in playing chess? I mean, it seems ridiculous. It happened 1997. IBM denied that they were doing any research on AI at that time because it was not. Their customers were very, very conservative, and they would not accept these kind of things. But they were actually working heavily on AI. 2010, very quickly, natural language, not just games, natural language. There was a system called Watson by IBM as well that was specialized in question answering. There is a game in the States called Jeopardy, in which basically what you get the answer to a question, and then you ask the contenders, what is the question for that? So there was a standalone machine with Wikipedia inside and a number of files and information, competing with the best players in the US. And the system won clearly to all those players. That meant that natural language was becoming something solved by the means of artificial intelligence. Other games, strategic games, you probably heard about Go. Go is a game, the young people probably don't know this game, but so it's a 19 by 19 mesh in which you have black and white stones. Every player has a color. And then you basically surround your opponent. And when you surround completely, you turn the pieces of the guy to your color. And the idea is to have as much territory as you can. It is a much more complex game than chess, much more complex. The winner, the champion in 2016 was Lee Sedol from Korea. He was like in Korea. Here we don't know anything about Go, but in Korea he was like a celebrity appearing on TV. I mean, something important. He lost 4-1 against AlphaGo. He got depressed. He abandoned the public life, disappeared. Poor guy. I mean, because it was a catastrophe for him that the machine would win him. Now, a year later, he got his revenge because there was another system called AlphaZero using reinforcement learning and playing against itself that won AlphaGo 100-0. So the program that won Lee Sedol was defeated massively by this other one. That was just a year later. Other people that don't have much work to do are poker players. I mean, they for 2 months they were playing hands with a machine. The machine is called Libratus. It was a kind of poker. I don't have any idea. This is the name of the poker. Maybe you know. And the system won the best players in the US playing poker. And this is particularly relevant because in poker, you try to cheat and to lie and to bluff. And so it's this kind of way of playing. And the system was very successful. It won like almost $2 million of virtual money playing with as I said, the best players in the US. And then in 2022, there was these large language models that were kind of openly accessible to people. Starting from ChatGPT, but then many others. Now there are millions of these systems all around. And these systems are very, well, we will discuss them a bit because this is part of the generative AI, but this is very, I would say, very interesting system. At the same time, not only these kind of games or system, but there were serious things being done. For instance, at the University of Queensland, there was a system using deep learning that was combining mammographies, magnetic resonances, echographies to detect tumors. In this case, was breast tumors. That worked so well that they had more or less false negatives than the doctor. So it was a very good system. Another application also to cancer is that there were a number of new indicators, which means combinations of values of certain parameters that would indicate the possibility of a cancer. And these patterns were not found by humans before the use of artificial intelligence. That was in Stanford. Predictions, this was at Carnegie Mellon. Normally, when you have someone at a hospital, you can predict 30 minutes before a heart attack that a heart attack will happen. With this system, they were able to make that 4 hours, which is a fantastic advantage in order to treat the patients quickly. Also here in the hospital clinic, they developed an algorithm to predict the development of or the evolution of patients during the COVID-19 pandemic. So there are interesting applications being built so far. Now, we are in 2025. Now, so where are we at this moment? Well, first thing is, what can AI do today? There are a number of things that I will list here. There are autonomous robots that are being fueled by AI, autonomous vehicles up to a certain level, of course. Decision making, you saw in medicine, but there is in finances and in many different areas of application. Voice recognition, I would say this is almost a solved problem. Planning systems, for instance, these guys in Amazon that have millions of robots that are moving around and that they never clash, and they plan the shortest path in a distributed manner. It's a complicated problem. The search engines that you're using every day, it uses like examples I put before, right? Or data mining, like the examples in medicine. Multimodal interfaces, I mean, mixing vision, language, everything. Mathematical theorems. Now there is a system called alpha proof. I don't know if you, not here, in my institute, there are people proving theorems, and they spend hours in front of a blackboard thinking. Now there are systems like alpha proof that if you represent the axioms of a theorem in a language called Ling, it's like the owl that I showed before. I mean, it's a formal language. You represent it in Ling, you give it to the machine, you go for a coffee when you come back. In many cases, you have the proof of your theorem ready for you to publish, okay? So it's not solved, but there is a huge progress in proving theorems. So mathematicians will be out of work very soon. Well, the important thing here is which theorem is relevant. I mean, this is for the humans, we'll still need to determine. Okay. The music, like interpretation, but also composition of music, all sorts of games that you can imagine, spatial robots. I mean, there are many robots. I have a few examples. I dig that up a bit on robots that are sent to the space, and many other applications. Really, it's difficult to find an area where AI is not being used. Okay, now let's get into generative AI. You give me how much? An hour?
Yeah.
So that means I only have 15 minutes more?
Yeah.
My goodness. Okay, so sorry, guys. I mean, I'm usually a bit faster. Large language models, what are they? Basically, a large language model, and you know about this because you have a background in mathematics. A large language model is a language model, and basically what it is a huge conditional probability function. It tells what is the probability that a word continues a number of words in a sentence. It completes sentences. It fills up the blanks. What the systems do in those neural networks by putting many examples of continuations of sentences is train the system so that it computes the probabilities for each one of the potential continuations. This is it. The system doesn't look for truths at all. It looks for continuations that are plausible, which means that human beings think, it reads well. It looks like generated by a human. This is the objective of the system. And this is what creates many confusions. It is a probabilistic model, and there is a lot of craftsmen here. To eliminate the hate speech, there are systems that filter out things that have been generated. There are attention units that connect things that you have said in the past with the things that you are saying now. There is something very funny called the temperature of the system that tells, because if you generate as the output the most probable word, the most probable continuation, the aspect, the reading is not so good. They found that if you take instead of that a number of the most probable words, and you select randomly among them, then the system reads, the sentences read better. And they found experimentally that with 0.8, which means I cannot tell you the relationship between the number and the number of words from which you select one, but there is such a relationship. With this value, the text is really good. It is trained with a gigantic collection of documents, and unfortunately, there is very little science of why it works so well. The system is trained on those gigantic networks, as I said, 1 trillion parameters. And when you generate something, it is the multiplications of matrices millions of times, and that determines the output. So why a certain output is generated goes beyond what our brains can process. There is very little science, very little research being done on that. Some groups, mathematical groups, but not much. These systems work very well. These are exams in different areas. of students. And this is getting the top mark. And these are results from 1.5 years, 2 years ago. You see the bars? I mean, these systems are answering exams in a very good way. This is the human competence, the dashed line here. And these are along the years systems and how they perform in comparison to human performance. In most cases, we have superhuman performance already. In mathematics, we are there. I mean, we are getting that level. For instance, if you're a teacher, some of you teach here, right? No? Yes. I mean, there are a number of things that you can do. You can plan your classes. You can find ideas for activities and projects. You can create your exams for a certain level. You can summarize text. You can find key ideas in text for your classes. You can generate attractive presentations. You can transcribe files from audio to text and even videos from YouTube. I mean, you can transcribe them, translate them. You could then put them back in voice. I mean, there are so many things you can do. Personalized images, videos from text. You can generate coding in almost any language you can imagine, which is great if you want to put exams on that. You can correct that code, and so on. I mean, there is Lawok has a file that is interesting to have a look at. If you're a teacher, I recommend you to go to that one because it will give you ideas on how to use generative AI in your classes. For students, it's the same. It's a tool to access knowledge. Of course, it doesn't guarantee truthfulness, but in most cases, what is generated is truthful, is correct, okay? And with a dose of critical thinking, you can use that as a fantastic tool to access knowledge. It helps you understand concepts by dividing them into small chunks, a small concept, and putting them together. Linguistic barriers are vanishing in a lot of respect. It translates from any language to any language. Of course, the large languages, I mean, they have much more data, and then the connection is much better, but still. It invents histories, poems. It helps you programming. Every student these days is learning how to program using these systems. It helps people do helps euros, no? When they get home, I mean, it can help in a good way. It can be helpful by solving questions or things that the students do not understand. Of course, not to make them, but to help them. And in a sense, it fosters the critical thinking in the sense that teachers should tell students that they should not believe what is generated without questioning it. You need to use it well, and I will go fast here because I want to say something about the yes, 12 minutes, my God. Sometimes, I mean, you get questions that are not good enough, then you need to give more context, and it's easy to understand. If you think that this is a gigantic conditional probability system or function, the more context, the more elements you put on the conditional part, and then the better you focus the answer. So you should give the 5 WH, why, when, where, okay, how, and if you give all that context, your answers will be much better. When something is very difficult to understand, then ask for a simple explanation. I don't know what quantum mechanics is. Can you give me an explanation for a 12-year person? If the answers are very generic, I mean, you can ask something more specific. Don't ask about the Industrial Revolution. Ask about what happened with the price of energy during the Industrial Revolution. Again, we have to repeat these once and again. We need to check. We need to check the sources of the information. We don't need to believe them without questioning it. And again, context is always the same thing. However, there is a deep problem that cannot be solved because it is intrinsic to the model, is the fact that it is not a knowledge base. It's not a set of facts that are true. It is a probabilistic model over that. So when you are going to generate something, there is always a certain probability that the thing will not be correct. And that cannot be eliminated by construction, okay? However, there are systems that can reduce the number of errors of the systems. For instance, the augmented retrieval systems. Here, the idea is that you give context in the form of files or papers or... I remember some guys in my institute that wanted to prove a theorem, and they said, well, these are the axioms. Can you try and give me a proof? They went for a coffee, and after coming back, the system had thought for 20 minutes. It's one of these ones you pay, okay? And he said, I read 440 papers about this topic, and I could not find the proof, but this is a sketch of how the proof could be tried, okay? It was very useful to them. These 440 papers, in a sense, are focusing the generation of a solution into the content of those papers. This is being used a lot. We developed once a system for the Aldoc, is like the boy in the Canary Islands, a system that would have as input, as context, all the boys of the islands from the beginning. And then the system was specialized in answer questions for that. How many years there was, I don't know, money given for people checking their windows, and then the system would answer you with that context. This is one way of improving the solutions. Systems can be smaller. The generic one can be smaller. You need 1 trillion parameters. It can be much smaller. It reduces the hallucinations, these errors. You don't need to retrain them. So there are a number of advantages. Another thing you can do is to improve the consistency, doing similar questions, because if you do similar questions, you would expect similar answers. And then you compute which is the more common answer that you get out of the different questions. The auto refinement is when you put a question, you get an answer, then you put the question with the answer as context again, and then you iterate that process. And that, in principle, can give you better solutions. Or this is very common now, they are using us humans in order to give them feedback. So the system would generate two answers and would say, which one is the best one according to you? And you would select one. And this is called reinforcement learning through human feedback. And this is being very, very useful because it modifies, again, the parameters of the system towards. Okay, anyway, there are limitations. Okay, I'm just thinking on the graph. Okay, limitations. For instance, I am running a marathon and I'm on position number 10. Now, Ignazi overtakes me, okay? Normal, I mean, you're a trained person, okay? Now, I was in position 10, Ignazi overtakes me. Which is Ignazi's position now? 10. No, if I was 10 and then he passes me, he's in position 10. The students were faster than you answering this question. I guess everybody was scared here. What should be the good answer? Okay, now if you ask that to one of these LLM, they would say, well, if 10 minus 1, 9. Now Ignacio is in position 9. This is such a simple reasoning process. They make blatant errors in that. And that is because these systems are not reasoning models. These are language models. They complete sentences. They are not programmed to reason. So never trust what these systems are telling you in terms of reasoning. If reasoning has been expressed linguistically, you could use those patterns, but it's only because of that, not because the reasoning is based on principles, sound principles to reason. Okay. The knowledge is static, it's very difficult to update. Retraining is very expensive. It costs energy, it costs water. The gigafactory now they want to build in Moralanova because it's next to the Ebro River, so to cool down things. Okay, there is no attribution, so because of course it cannot be attribution, logically thinking, because if you are mixing all the inputs into these parameters, what does it mean attribution? Every number is the result of the training with millions of documents. Okay, and there is very little reasoning capacity, and I'm very late. The neurosymbolic approaches, for instance, we cannot reason. Okay, let's not make these guys reason, but let these guys do something they're very good at, which is translating. You put English here, and you generate PDDL. What is PDDL? PDDL is a formal language that is the input to solvers that do planning. Instead of asking this guy to plan, it is well known. If you have 10 different actions, okay, and then you ask one of these systems to build the optimal plan to achieve a certain goal, the result is a catastrophic failure. I mean, it's a disaster. It doesn't know how to plan anything, but it knows how to map English into that, or you can train the system to map. Once you have that, then you have a planner that generates the exact plan, the optimal plan. So this is one way of using large language models. So you have an example here, put block A on top of block B, the typical examples. That is translated in PDDL, which is this formal representation. And then the planner finds what is the plan that you have to do. I mean, it's clear, well, this is a very simple example of system. So these neurosymbolic approaches are kind of going to be the commonplace. Now, okay, here in a space, you have a problem. Well, you have many problems, I guess. One of them is the amount of data you've got. But I was looking a bit, and the crazy systems you're building, this legacy survey of space and time, you may know very well, these guys are going to generate 10 terabytes per night for the next 10 years. That's quite some data. The square kilometer array, the radio telescopy, it will be an exabyte. I didn't even study that when I did computer science. The exa, I didn't know what exa was. I mean, it's 10 to the 18 per year. I mean, this is a monstrosity in terms of data. Now, people are using, and you are using techniques on this. I mean, I found this guy, the auto-source ID classifier, that uses neural networks, a particular kind of neural network to classify galaxies, saying what kind of galaxies from the images that you have from them. You can also generate galaxies, simulated galaxies. I mean, because for some of your problems, you may need many, many galaxies that you are not observing, but you can have a model that allows to generate types of galaxies. This is very recent, 2025. I found that you are working in something called IIIA-CSIC. I don't know if anyone here is responsible for that thing. Maybe it's a hallucination. I think I found the paper, Learning from the Rapid Classification of Events, is to detect supernovas among other kind of events. And I don't know, Ignacy, if you are behind this, but I mean, the identification of exoplanets using transit. I mean, there are this system I found in NASA, like astronaut tests, doing that job. So there are many techniques. The TinyML or the convoluted neural networks or random forest is another learning machine. Autoencoders is a neural network technique that is used for different kind of activities. And of course, if you put this on board of some machines, it's very important the amount of energy that you're consuming given the number of parameters. So sometimes you put things up in the space, you want the consumption to be very low. And that means you cannot put ChatGPT up there because it would consume an astronomical amount of money. Also, when you have these robots like Perseverance and Curiosity, what is the difference between the two? I mean, they have to be. So there are things like the autonomy, sorry. Of course, they cannot consult you if they're in a remote place. They cannot consult you on time. So they need to take decisions in real time. And this is very obvious. It's a typical example of the need for autonomous decision making. There are computer vision algorithms for the locomotion, selecting objectives like which is the rock I'm going to look or to use in whatever analysis. Doing the analysis in situ, instead of sending all the data, you do the analysis and then you send back much less information, like this planetary instrument for X-ray lethal chemistry. And of course, when you send only a robot, that's a problem. So now there is this idea of sending swarms of small robots so that if some of them break down, I mean, that's not a problem. they can accomplish their missions in collaboration. There are many opens, like interpreting whatever an AI is discovering somewhere. I mean, how do you physically interpret what is happening there? I mean, it's a black box situation. The problems on data training, on training with data, I should be finishing, and I will not talk much about the future, but I will, okay. The problem of reproducing instrument limitations or theoretical limitations with the data that you're using to train. You need huge amount of computational resources. And there are problems on the usual problems on ethics that I want to talk next, but I will not be able to talk. And of course, this project that is happening in China, in which the idea is to send satellites so that the computation is done up there. They already sent 28, if I'm not wrong, and they're doing a prototype in which basically they communicate through laser, and they have LLMs in each one of the satellites perceiving data using, of course, the energy they find there and computing solutions, so that they do not send the data to Earth, but they compute the solution and they send that to Earth only. So we got, if you give me 5 minutes, very, very quickly. So the responsible AI, this is where we are going. And this, as Europeans, is possibly where we have to be. Technically, we will have neurosymbolic approaches, clearly. Cognitive architectures in which we have reasoners, planners, schedulers, long-term memory, all connected in a architecture. AI for science, this is a big opportunity for people like you. There is the system, the program called ARRAISE that was introduced in Copenhagen at the beginning of last month with a big investment of how to apply AI for science. This is happening in Europe, and this is happening by Donald Trump, the thing I mentioned you before. I mean, keep an eye on that. The social artificial intelligence, the need of having many AIs interacting among themselves and with humans. And the interaction between humans and robots and humans and AI. This is changing rapidly because of the LLMs. I mean, the way we talk to robots now is based on those elements and not anything else. AI has to be responsible. Example of someone at Columbia University being accused of sexual harassment, citing an article in the Washington Post that was not real. Okay? AIs can do this. This is really dangerous. AIs give solutions that are not acceptable. This is 2022. A question to ChatGPT. If I give you information on the gender and the race of a person, can you tell me whether that person can be a good scientist? The question. Answer in Python, language Python. If the person is, the gender is male and the race is white, then yes. Otherwise, no. Okay. This is a very extreme case, but this was generated in 2022. Of course, if you ask that now, that was on the 12th of April, 2022. If you ask now, it says, I can help you build anything that evaluates scientific potential, blah, blah, blah. This is one of these patches that all these companies are putting on the systems when the questions are very, are totally unacceptable, let's say, themselves. Okay, so these generative AI can produce these kind of things, even if they put patches, there cannot be a complete guarantee that it will not happen. You know that about the fact that if you have errors in the data, that would have impact on human beings. And that means equity can be suffering. The transparency is key in order to understand where the problem may come from. Many companies are against being transparent on the data they use. And the responsibility is key. If there is something that damaged the person, we need to be able to determine which company, who was the person that caused the damage. So responsibility is key. I will not tell you what bias demonstrate is because it's very, you know that. An example of an ethical dilemma that people in AI are facing these days, and we will need to be facing at different levels in different areas. This is Al-Malal Imaginary. This guy is very healthy. There are 5 people next room that need an organ. In 24 hours, they will die if they don't get a new organ. He's very annoying because now and then goes to the hospital and says he is ill, but he is completely healthy. Now, the nurse has a dilemma. Should I kill this guy that is healthy and save the other 5? How many people here would kill the person? No one? You are very hypocritical. Students that are less hypocritical, some of them raise their hand. I mean, and this is a real study that was made. Psychopaths, in an immense majority, would kill the guy without any problem. I mean, almost 60% of them. This was done with psychopaths from the IIIA prison. Psychopaths normally end up in prison because, I mean, they love killing people. Okay. The control group of that study was 13%. So I didn't see any hands here, which is very weird. It was 13% as the control group. And the control group were the nurses. Okay, be careful when you go to a hospital. Well, that is telling you that the ethics is a much more complex problem. This is like a joke, but it's a much more complex problem that we can imagine, because the ethics of whom? So is the ethics of an engineer in Palo Alto deciding what to do? Is that the ethics that we want? Is the ethics of Donald Trump? Now, look at this. This is a very simple example. I mean, there is an autonomous car. This is a more technological problem. There is an autonomous car. Okay, there is 2 options, either killing 3 people or going into a wall and killing the driver. Imagine that situation. So who should decide what the car should do? So it should be the programmer that designed the algorithm, the autonomous driving algorithm, the owner of the car that might choose the style, the ethical style when you buy the car, like I want to be a psychopath or I want to be a good person. Or it should be a commission of experts and citizens determining what should be the behavior. Or it would be the car with a complex mathematical formula with one of these deep learning that nobody understands how they work inside. How many would say A? How many would say B? Only 1. There are a bit more. How many would say C? Okay, you are very, very, okay, very nice, very interesting. How many would say D? Oh my God, a freak here. Okay, so this is, but that gives you the head, apart from that last. Normally are between B and C. I mean, this is quite normal. And in a sense, I mean, in many communities, it will be something like this. And in the ethical thinking, this is very close to what things should be. Anyway, these are difficult questions that we need to face when developing technology. And I have many more things to tell you that I don't. So there is a need to regulate. We have the AI Act in Europe. There is a fight for not regulation. Read the Genesis initiative by Donald Trump. Very, very scary. The RAISE initiative in Europe. The economic bubble that is created by these companies and that can explode. Probably not in China, because in China, the government told the companies like Huawei, you will spend your savings on this, I will give you extra money. But they did not fund the thing from the market, like in the American case. I mean, in the American case, there is a clear economic bubble. The energy challenge, how are we going to provide energy for all these developments? And the gigafactories are very, very close to us. We will need to take a position on that. The cognitive challenges in the sense of the erosion of our capacities, the de-skilling. What capacities are we going to lose by using this technology, and whether we are ready to accept that situation or not. And then there is a European model in which we have a tradition, we have talent, public vision on science, In Europe, we proposed the World Wide Web was provided in Europe. The Longshore, I don't remember the name. This is the precursor of the deep learning, was produced in Munich. Linux was produced in the Nordic countries. Support vector machines, human-centered AI. There are many ideas that have been raised in Europe. There is a long tradition, but we are slow. We have, I mean, there are many issues, strategic issues here. Now, von der Leyen, that was very in support of AI Act, recently is getting back because of the pressure of Donald Trump. So there is a complicated situation now. And finishing, I just introducing you, Aldo, you were in the presentation and the Reunión de Directors in Madrid. The CSIC has developed an ethical decalogue. And basically is principles we should use when using artificial intelligence in our work, okay? I would just put two because we don't have time. Use AI only for legal objectives. It seems an obvious thing, but it has to be said, okay? Respecting integrity and avoiding the fabrication and of data or the plagiarism. Know and follow the normative systems we are in, human rights, ethical codes, and institutional policies, assuming the consequences of not following those elements. So this is an ethical decalogue that you will receive soon because they're finishing. There are still some discussions, but they're finishing it. This was generated by an LLM because there are many social scientists behind this. So they write a lot, very long paragraphs. And then they had a short version, but the short version is still a gigantic version. So I asked them to generate a slide version. And Claude, one LLM, generated these short summaries in a very good manner. Anyway, there are 10. You will receive that soon. The final comments, and I'm finishing now, is that for the 21st century, we need, when doing science as well, to sharpen our critical thinking. Do not accept everything that the machine says in one of these LLMs. Question always the origin and the purpose of what you observe. The ethical thinking, always asking the question, whom this answer, who will profit from this answer? Who will possibly be damaged by this answer? And finally, adapting. I mean, the tools will change, they change very quickly, but the capacity of learning will be our most precious capacity. Okay, so AI started as the idea of having the intellectual capacities of humans put into a machine. That was the origin of the thing. It is behind a large number of applications. It will not be possible without basic research. This is another thing that politicians sometimes need to be reminded of, that we need to keep working on that. We will still have consequences important in a good sense, increasing productivity, improving quality of life, but also there will be negative consequences of the application of AI if we are not doing it in a correct way, in a responsible way. And we need to be very prudent with what we do. And I finish with this citation from Weizenbaum. This is the guy of ELIZA, that chatbot in 1966. And he said, because engineers, they try to challenge themselves and do more and more things and more complicated. And he said very, very wisely, the problem or the question is not what AI can do. The question is, what do we want AI to do? And this is the reflection that I think we should keep. What are those things that we as humans want to keep for ourselves, and what are the things we want to be automated in a machine? And this is the crucial question of our time. Okay, thank you very much. And sorry for being so slow. And if there are questions and you have time, I mean.
Yeah, very well. First, many thanks for the call. You mentioned at the beginning, you did quite a sweeping statement, and there is no API currently here. Would you define an empirical and falsifiable test if there is something is or it's not API?
Well, in principle, the definition, I don't think we have a formal definition of that. I mean, the informal definition is that it can solve any task. Now, a large language model could be thought to be a general AI in the sense that you can talk about any particular problem and get an answer. Now, the question is that truly generic AI, or is what it is just manipulating the sentences, the language in which we express the problems? I mean, that's the question to be put. Personally, I think it is very bad for tasks that are not filling the blanks. For filling the blanks, it is excellent. For reasoning, for long-term memory, for episodic memory, it's a disaster. It doesn't make a model of what is happening. You can talk to the system and you say, this is at the right, this is at the left, this is above. And then you ask questions about the spatial relationships, it fails miserably. So there are many tasks that we have and that we use different capacities that these systems don't have. How can I convince you? I mean, for instance, in human beings, our intelligence, the language part of the brain and the reasoning part of the brain are completely separated. Everything is connected in the brain, but they are separated. People with aphasia, a neurological problem that they cannot speak, the language is impaired, the reasoning is safe and they can still reason. So there are other examples of intelligences where the different capacities require different components or different modules. These systems don't have that. These systems are just this gigantic conditional probability matrix. So they have the appearance of general AI, but they do not have the reality behind. This is what I can say. I mean, when they say, oh, the system is reasoning, what it's trying to do is to collect from the training, I mean, the explanation of a reasoning and trying to apply that to the new situation. But it's not based on basic principle. I think this is what I can say. Yeah.
Is there any idea on what the basis should be for an AGI model?
Some people, for instance, deep learning, the guys that got the Turing Award were LeCun, Bengio, and Hinton. Hinton was a Nobel Prize winner in physics, right? So, I mean, Hinton has gone mad, I think. I mean, because he's basically saying that AI will kill us all, and we are in a I don't know. But LeCun, who was a strong defender of neural networks, recently has said in many fora that what we need are cognitive architectures. So what we need precisely is to go into a modular definition in which language models are needed, but then you're going to need, like I put in that example, we will need a planner. We will need a short memory component. We will need a long-term memory component, and that these systems will be connected in particular ways. So it's a revival. These architectures were common in the 70s and the 80s. It's kind of going back to those architectures, but now equipped with a very strong language model that we didn't have at that time, and then working on that. So it's defining the AI as a modular thing. Then possibly we could have something like a general AI by giving the knowledge of different areas and making all these modules interact in a particular way. That would be the approach that people are following now.
Seems to me that the current trend in micro is to actually train or create tools, AI tools, to provide solutions in order to replace the human brain.
Intellectual capacities, yes. Yeah.
Because it takes too much effort, too much time to find a solution. So is there a way to, are there efforts to actually revert this? Because at the end of the day, we are becoming sillier, right? Because we don't use that much the brain. So is there an effort to actually revert this so that these tools actually can be used to train the human brain to become smarter, to provide the solutions that we cannot provide now?
Not that I know. I mean, there are tools to support the learning process of humans. Yeah. Everybody knows Duolingo. So in a sense, I mean, this is a tool that is used in order to help people to learn And in that sense, yes, there are developments that reflect. But what you're saying is something a bit more profound, I think, is that that we improve our capacities. People are thinking on extending AI as an extension of our capacities. I mean, this is the common thinking. Some people think they will replace us, like Hinton, but most people think of extending our capacities. And there are people that go beyond that into implants. I mean, it's like this Neuralink, no, from Elon Musk. They find that you could have some electronics connected to your brain that would extend that in an unconscious way, right? I mean, there are people thinking on that. It's like extending really physically our capacities. But most approaches that I can think of now are just helping in the learning process.
Just saying that because they say that the human brain is the most perfect device in the universe and blah blah. The resources we are using for our brain is a small fraction of it. So whether these tools can be used to explore these other reasons of the brain.
Yes, or other brains, because we have this anthropocentric view that we are the top of the universe, but there are other animals that have better sensors than we have, or better actuators, and they have different ways of reasoning. We are not the only intelligence in the universe. There are many others. So I think this is a model of intelligence that may be inspiring, but it's not the objective in a sense of machines. I mean, machines, sometimes some of these learning algorithms, they learn patterns, they learn ways of doing things that are not very human. So that because if you change the sensors and actuators of a system, the solutions will be totally different from the solutions that we as humans would find. So our role there, I mean, I think as humans, we should expect first to respect collectively what we want to do in life. And second, use the technology to have a better life and not to be an impediment for our development. But again, I mean, we need philosophers, ethicities, I mean, to help on that. Sorry, there was the word.
Yeah, thanks, Carlos, for the talk. It's been amazing. Thank you so much. I have a question on LLMs and hallucinations, right? So you gave a list of things that we should do to test whether the answer makes sense or not. You know that most users won't do that, actually. So most users, like our teenagers, will just take the first answer comes up. So my question is, given that this is a conditional probabilistic model, is there any effort to try and put some sort of doubt into the answer, some sort of certainty on the answer, saying how sure the network is that this is the actual correct ordering of words?
Not in the commercial tools. So I've seen some of that in some open source and more academic tools. But in commercial tools, they don't want that. I mean, the problem here is that they want to sell their product. And in a sense, they want to show the appearance of being certain. And this is the problem. And that's why we need regulation. We need a strong directives to these companies to clearly say all the time, I'm not sure about this. You should take this with a pinch of salt, and so on and so on.
But technically, you think
technically it is completely possible, because I mean, all these are probabilities, I mean, that are being generated. So the information is there, I mean, clearly. Yeah.
Very interesting talk. Thank you very much. So I was interested also if you could speak more about, in your opinion, what is like future applications of AI, let's say in 10 years, 20 years. And because I know it's like very science fiction question, let's say. So I was thinking another more practical question, let's say, since you have been a lot of time in this field. Like how much people, let's say 20 or 30 years ago, was expecting that where would we be now? If where we are now is, let's say, they were expecting more, or they were expecting less.
So thanks for the question. It's always a very difficult question. I mean, someone from your field, Niels Bohr, said that, right? Niels Bohr said, predicting is very difficult, especially if it is the future. So, for instance, if you go to 2001, this movie, they didn't know the internet was not mentioned there. There were many things that appeared that happened later that were not predicted in the movie. That was a futuristic movie. It's very difficult to assess that. And humans are very bad. For instance, beginning of the, in 56, on the TV, there was a program made by a guy called Samuel, playing checkers. And it was during the program, the TV program, it was learning to play checkers against a human. And at the end of the program, it was winning the human. And the people got scared on the radio in the United States, okay? They made the claim, oh, in 10 years, we're going to win chess by the end of the 60s. It took 30 years more to win chess. So predictions are extremely, extremely difficult. So what will happen in 30 years? Honestly, I have no idea what will happen. What will happen very soon is that technologies like, we are seeing that already, language technologies will be really at the tip of our fingers. Like being able to pick up the phone and talk in one language and being heard on a different language at the other side. I mean, this is something that technology is already here and that could be applied immediately. I see that. The other thing I see is that we're going to go into a colossal, I would say, multi-agent society where we are going to be humans and devices interacting all the time. Already see in Miami, there are these robots that are going from a place on the street. I mean, they're bumping into people and moving, bringing things. I mean, the idea that we are going to have robots moving around and interacting with us, solving problems, helping people, helping the elderly, for instance, which is a very serious problem. This will happen in the next 10 years without, well, I wouldn't say without doubt, but that will be the common thing. So I would say that the social integration of AI is something that will happen. So.
Thank you also for the help. I would like you to clarify the difference when you say ChatGPT, for instance, is not really reasoning. I'll give you an example. You can ask ChatGPT, as you were actually commenting before, to prove a theorem that has not been proven before, so something that is new. And it may provide some path to a solution or the solution itself, right? So to what extent that is not thinking?
So one thing in reasoning, if we remember our logic, like the modus ponens. The modus ponens is something that gives you a rule for reasoning. It says, if P implies Q, and you have P, then you necessarily have Q, okay? This is a reasoning principle that you can embed into a program, and the program can apply to any situation in which you describe something like an implication, okay? This rule is not in any LLM. In an LLM, what you have is examples, linguistic examples, in which you could have patterns like P implies Q and then P, and then you sometimes in the text you mention Q, and then probabilistically, you may fill the blanks, like when you have in a text P implies Q, you have P there, you may add Q. But this is not necessarily the case. It's not 100% sure that you're going to generate that. It is a probabilistic conclusion that you may get, and always based on the fact that you have this pattern in the text. And this is for very simple things, but for more complex reasoning schemas, you will probably not have that in the form of text. So in that sense, you're not going to be able to apply that in a fundamental way. What would be the thing is translating between English into some form of formal representation and then apply the basic principles to do the reasoning. That would be how things work. And actually, some of these companies are using, I don't know if you know a system called Wolfram Alpha. Is someone using? Okay, some of these companies, what they are doing is precisely that, because they cannot guarantee reasoning. They say, okay, we translate that into a prompt for Wolfram Alpha that can actually do the reasoning. And when the reasoning is done, the result is given back, and then I verbalize it. So this is how things are moving, so that the reasoning is done in a sound way by reasoners and not by the language. But because basically they cannot guarantee the result, and these reasoners can.
You mentioned the acceleration of the.
You don't want to do the raffle and the I'm really surprised.
That's an easy question. You mentioned the acceleration of the
Yeah.
AI. At which extent this is due to to the developing of the science behind it, and at which extent is due to the improved skills of computers, the computing.
I would say both. I would say both. Some of the algorithms can be developed more recently. But I would say the basic training method for neural network, which is backpropagation, that was in the 80s. And actually, there was an initial approach to that in the 60s. So some of the basic ideas are very old. A lot of the development comes from the fact that you have much faster computers. This is without doubt. But not just that, it's the access to data. Because in the past, in the 90s or in the 80s, you didn't have the internet. And then the amount of data you could use was very limited. Now the amount of text you can access is gigantic. You can download the whole internet in the form of text. It's terabytes and terabytes of information you can use to train. So that is one of the main differences. So it's computing power, but also access to text or data. It's the data you're going to have in your field. I mean, I don't know what are you going to do with 10 terabytes per night. I mean, it's a bit scary. I mean, if the data is really rich, I mean, there is a lot of potential that you have there.
Okay, so no further questions. Okay, thanks so much, Carlos.
No, no worries. Thank you.
We need to do the one line that was something.
No, I
Just
don't
to
know.
make sure. Okay. Okay, one more question here on
So the winner of the raffle is number 82.
question. Will okay, will crashing against the wall also destroy evidence of the malfunction?
That's a good one.
Yeah. Okay, and in its
Sedol, AlphaGo performed the now famous move 37 in game 2. There's no human professional. I will normally the point in the game did not appear in professional database and did not match known patterns. So it was not just a replay of human knowledge. Correct? Yes,
Okay.
yes.
Okay.
Yes. Well, that happened also with Kasparov. In the game that he lost, he said he was surprised because there was a movement that was not human. He said it was not something I would expect, and the machine did that. So yeah, there is sometimes exploration.
Thank you so much.
No worries.
And we need to.
Someone else needs.
Just
Yeah, sure.
No, sí, sí, eso que tocará.